We begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Beis Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top of the Yamud, where it says Ma Yekeh. So what we learned yesterday was the Gemara's explanation for the first halacha of the Mishnah, that when it comes to Kodesh, you're not allowed to toivel one keli inside another. When by Trumah, we're not machmir that much. So the Gemara brought 2 reasons. Rav Ila said the reason is because we're afraid that the water won't get in properly and there'll be a chatzitza. According to Rava, he says, no, that's not the reason. The reason is there's a gzeira. If you allow a person to put one keli into another, he might take these little pins and little needles and put it into another small keli, which has a very small opening. An opening that's k'shveiferes hanoid, less than the 2 finger breadths of a person. That's the gzeira. So the Gemara now will explain that there's an afgemina between these 2 reasons. What would be a practical difference between Rava's reason and Rabbi Ila's reason? So the Gemara answers, the difference would be sal v'gargusni. If a person takes a basket and a gargusni, which is also, Rashi says, a very big basket, which is used by the wine, when they would press the wine, so the wine would be like a strainer to go through this basket. So he's using a basket or a very large basket to place kalim inside. Shemilon kalim, he filled it up with kalim bilon. And this is how he's toiveling it in the mikveh. The opinion that says that the issue is toiveling one keli inside another could be a cause that will be a chatzitze. So that still is an issue. Because even though it's a very big basket, but if one inside another, we're afraid the water might not go in properly, especially if the kalim you're placing inside are heavy. But the one that says, what's the gzeira? That you might come to place these kalim inside a very small keli that has a very, very tiny opening. Using such a massive basket that it never has, you don't have these baskets that have such a kind of a small opening. Over here, there's no such a kind of gzeira. Regarding any other kind of keli, which sometimes have these very little openings to them, over there maybe there's a gzeira, but not for these baskets. Not the concern. He holds a chatzitza is an issue, but the concern that it might be a chatzitza, no, he doesn't hold to that.
The sal holds the sal?
The sal, well, yeah, l'chayre they have in it these holes in it, yeah.
So if he's not worried about, if he's worried about chatzitza, what's the difference? He put it in a more or less closed keli? Again,
Rava is not worried about chatzitza. Rava is not concerned about chatzitza, so therefore you can toivel in the big baskets. For us, the Rava goes according to his opinion. Rava said this clearly elsewhere. Rava said, sal v'gargusni shemilon kalim. You have a basket, or this large basket, that you filled it up with other kalim, v'hid bilon, and you toiveled it this way, tahirin. It's tired, it's good. Then Rava says another halacha, which is not exactly directly related to this, but also about this basket. Mikveh shecholkoi b'sal v'gargusni. A mikveh that you divided the mikveh into 2 with this sal and gargusni. So it was a one mikveh, and it had enough of a shiur in it, 40 saw. But now the mikveh split into 2. So on each side of the mikveh, you don't have the minimum size of a mikveh. So this, when you split it with this kind of a basket, it's a basket that allows some water to flow through it. It's not a basket that's right. So the question is it still considered to be one big mikveh? So he says, no, toivel sham loy also loy tefillah. If you're going to toivel there, because you now have this separation with this big basket, so the 2 sides of the mikveh are like 2 separate mikvehs. Are you going to say this basket it allows the water to flow through from one side to the other? So he brings an example that's not good enough. It's still considered to be 2 mikvahs. Why? The ha'ara kula chalchuli mechalchala. The ground also has these little holes in it that the water flows through and comes from under the ground. And nevertheless, if a person digs a pit in the ground and it's less than 40 saw and it's full of water, and that water that's attached to the ground has in it water. It has what?
Pores.
Has pores that comes up from the water that's underground. And it's connected really through those pores underground to everything, all the water that exists underground. So maybe you should say, even if there's no 40 saw right here present in this pit, but it's connected to the underground water. But we don't say that. Right? Even though the water is not, the ground is not solid, it allows water to come through. The same thing over here regarding these baskets, even though it's not a solid separation and it allows water to go through, but it's not good enough. it is considered to be a separation, that it's two mikvahs. So the Gemara, not going back.
What do you see from Rava? What's he bringing?
The second inyan of Rava is not negay. The first thing that Rava said. The first thing Rava said, exactly what we said before. Sal v'gargusni, that if you table inside of it, it's good. Now the Gemara says, V'hani mili, this whole thing that we said before, going back to the reason that Rava said before, that the issue of tabling one keli inside another is that we're afraid that you're going to table inside a keli that has a very small opening. And if it has a very small opening, the water that goes inside, it's not considered to be part of the mikveh. It's not going to be mitayr what's inside. And Gemara says that's not always true. V'hani mili, when is that true? B'keli toher. If the outside keli, which has a tiny opening, it itself is tar. You don't have to table it. You're trying to table other kelim that are inside. So then I say that those kelim that are inside are stuck inside with this very little opening. The water that gets inside is not considered to be connected to the mikveh. Aval b'kli tamei. What happens if the outside keli itself is also tamei, and you're trying to table the outside keli together with the other kelim that are inside? So then I say migud salke tvila lekule gufe demane, because the tvila of the mikveh is going to work for the outside keli as well. How are you going to table this outside keli? Even though it has a tiny opening, the only way to table it is to leave it in the water long enough that the whole inside should fill up with water and it should be fully immersed in the water. So since the tvila is going to work for the outside keli, so salkalunami lekelim deispe, so the tefillah will be effective also for everything that's inside. Right? It's not considered to be, you can't say what's inside is disconnected from the mikveh. That's not the case. The outside keli has to be taveled as well, and it's filling up with water. That's how you tavel it. So therefore, automatically, whatever's inside is going to be tired as well. If what, again? No. We're talking over here about the outside keli that has a tiny opening, small opening, and that there's other kelim inside. So before we said, because it has a very small opening, what's inside is not considered to be connected to the mikveh. So the Gemara is now saying, but that's only if the outside keli was tired itself. But if the outside keli is tamei, and he has to tovel the outside keli, so then whatever is inside will become tahar together with the tefillah of the outside keli. And the Gemara brings a source from this, from the Mishnah Mikvais. The Mishnah says in Mikvais, kelim shemilon kelim. You have kelim, and you filled it up with other kelim. Vidbilon, and you tabled it. Hare'elu tahirim. So then it's going to be tahir. So the Mishnah clearly says tahirim. It doesn't make a distinction between the size of the opening of the outside keli. It says it's going to be tahir. So Rashi says, so from here you see that it must be that Mishnah is speaking about that the outside keli was tummy as well. So because you have to table the outside keli, so the inside keli becomes tahir together with it. Then that Mishnah says, first let's read the lashon of that Mishnah, and the Gemara will explain it. V'im loy toval, if you did not tovel it, mayim amuravim, the water that mixes in, ad shiyu mu'uravim k'shveiferes hanoid. It mixes in, it has to be k'shveiferes hanoid, the opening of k'shveiferes hanoid. So this lashon of this Mishnah is very hard to understand. The Gemara asks over here right away, Mai ka'oma, what does this mean? V'im loy toval, if you did not tovel it. If you did not tovel it, so then obviously you didn't tovel it, so it's not toir. So the Gemara says the second half of that Mishnah is saying the point that we said before, which is v'im loy tovel doesn't mean that he did not tovel it. He did tovel it, but what it means is v'im einoy tzarech lad biloi. If the outside keli was tahir and it did not have to be toveled, and you take this outside keli which is tahir and you place inside of it other kelim, and there's water that's going to go inside, and that's how you want to be mitayr what's inside this keli. Umayim amuravin, and there's water that's mixing in, that's going inside this keli. Achiyu muravin k'shveiferes hanoid. It has to be large enough, k'shveiferes hanoid, this minimum size of the 2 fingers that a person can put into this hole that goes inside the keli, then it's going to be tahir. So here you have this clear Mishnah that's making this distinction. If the outside keli itself is tamei, so then I say that you table the outside keli together with the inside keli. It doesn't matter if it has a big hole or not. But if the outside keli doesn't need tefillah, so then the water that mixes into the inside keli has to be at least the size that it should be able to go in, k'shveiferes hanoid, to be part of the mikveh. If not, it's like separated from the mikveh.
So that also means that even if I left it in the water the whole time till it filled up, it's also not.
Correct.
It's Zeta.
Correct. It's not. Again, according to Rava, no, this is not exeda. If it's actually if the whole for the inside keli is actually too small, so the water that's inside the keli is like it's not in the mikveh at all. It's not a gzeira. It's like a separate entity. It's like not part of the mikveh. Just like if I take a...
was good.
Because then that's the only way I had to be toivel that outside keli, by allowing it to fill up. So because the tefillah works for the outside keli, so it's considered to be part of the mikveh. But in a case where the outside keli is anyways tar, and you're not immersing it in the mikveh to toivel, so then even after it fills up, the water that's inside is considered to be separated from the mikveh. It has such a tiny opening, it's not part of the mikveh, and therefore whatever is inside is going to be tummy. It's like it's not in the mikveh at all.
So we'll make it just because of that reason. Because it's the choice.
So, let's go weiter. V'ha de Rave or de Ravila Tanoi. This machlokes here between Rave and Ravila, whether by kachim, are we geyser even for a big basket or not? As we just said, that was the practical nafkamina between their reasons. So we find that this is a clear machlokes Tanoi. Tanya we learned in Abraise sal v'gar gusni. You have a basket and a very large basket. Shemilon kalim, you filled it up with other kalim. Vid bilon, and you toiveled it in the mikveh this way. Bein lekaidesh, bein letrume, whether it's for kachim, whether it's for trume, tahirin. Either way, it'll be tired. The gzeira by kachim, not to toivel one keli inside another, does not apply by a basket or by a large basket. Abba Shal loimer, but Abba Shal argues and says, letrume avaloi lekaidesh. For trume, this will be good. The tefillah will be good, but not for kaidesh. When it comes to kachim, the gzeira does apply even by a large basket. So here, this is like the opinion of Rav Ilo, that says that the issue is chatzitza, and therefore there's an issue of chatzitza even by a large basket. The Tanna Kama, though, goes according to Rava, that the issue is that we're afraid that there'll be a small opening, and what's inside there is separate from the mikveh. But that doesn't apply to a large basket. So we see that this exact machlokes is a machlokes here in this braisa. Now, the Gemara will explain, b'chlal, the whole entire thing that we're saying here. The halacha of the Mishnah is that this entire concept of not toiveling one keli inside another, whichever reason, Rava's reason, Rav Ila's reason, is only a chumrah by kachim, not by truma. By truma, the tefillah is good. So the Gemara will now explain if it's really a problem and there's a reason for a gzeira, why were they geyser only for kachim and not for truma? If so, truma nami, shouldn't we have the same concern regarding truma? Whether that it might be a chatzitza, or that the hole might be too small, and what's inside is not in the mikveh. So the Gemara answers, Leman kamrinon. For who are we saying the halacha of the Mishnah? Chavedim. We're saying this halacha for the chavedim. Chavedim is the term that's used by Tumah and Tara for those people that know the halachas, and listen to us, and are careful with the halachas. Chaverim, so since this is a Mishnah, these are the halachas that we're saying to people that are know the halachas, meida yadi. So they know the halachas, and therefore we're not concerned. Whether it's the reason for chatzitza, they know that there's an issue of chatzitza, so they'll be very careful that there shouldn't be chatzitza. Or whether the issue is that the hole, the opening in the inside keli, it's going to be too small for the kelim that are inside, they know that halacha as well, so we're not concerned of any of these problems. If the point is that the chavedim know the halacha, so there's no chashash to be concerned about, so say the same thing regarding kachim, that they know the halacha. And says the Gemara, chazile amaretz. But what we're afraid is that amaretz might be observing this, and he'll see how a person, which is a chaver, is toiveling one keli and another, and he does not know the halachas properly, so he might come to make a mistake and toivel the same way, and not be careful about a chatzitza, or not be careful about the fact that the opening is too small. V'azil and matpil, and he'll go and be toivel. If so, you should have the same concern regarding truma, that an amaretz sees this and will also be toivel in a way that's not proper and not a good tefillah. Again, truma nami chazle amaretz v'azlo matpel, and will go and toivel it this way. And says the Gemara, loy mekablina minayo. An amaretz, we will not accept his truma from him. Yeah, you're right, there's that concern, but we're not going to address it. We're not going to make a special gzeira that you shouldn't toivel this way, because we're not going to accept the truma from an amaretz. Again? But the Gemara is asking why not. The Gemara is asking that by amaretz he could see by truma this, and it'll be the same problem. So why shouldn't he be geyser? So the Gemara is saying the only reason we're not geyser is because we're not going to accept the truma from an amaretz. If so, so say the same thing regarding kachim. A amaretz that's coming and is donating kachim to the Beis HaMikdash, we shouldn't accept it from him, and therefore there'll be no problems. He might see and do that. He doesn't know the halachas right, and he might toivel not in the proper way, but we're just not going to accept it from him. Answers the Gemara, that's not an option. Havile Eva, because then this is going to cause animosity. He's going to be very upset. You're not accepting my kachim. So we don't want to bring to fights in Eva. Fragt the Gemara, Trume nami havile Eva. If so, by Trume, it's the same problem. How could you say we don't accept Trume from Amaretz? It'll also cause the same Eva. Answers the Gemara, lo yichbas leid. The Amaretz is not bothered by the fact that a Kayan is not accepting from him Trume, because the Azal Yavle le Kayan Amaretz Chavre. He'll find another Kayan that is an Amaretz just like him, and that Kayan will accept the Trume from him. But a Kayan that's a Chaver, which knows the halachas and is trying to be careful with the halachas of Tumah and Tara, he will not accept it from the Amaretz, so we're not concerned about that. But when it comes to Kachim though, it's not an option of going to another Kayan. He's coming to the Beis HaMikdash. He wants to donate Kachim to the Beis HaMikdash, and we're not going to accept it from him. He has nowhere else to go. He's being rejected. That's going to bring Eva. So now the Gemara will bring...
He didn't solve the problem.
Again?
He didn't solve the problem.
The Gemara is explaining that what it all boils
the
down to is... What you see from this Gemara is, what it all boils down to is, the only reason we're differentiating between Truma and Kachim is, it comes down to the Amaretz. When you get to Truma, there's an option of not accepting the Truma of an Amaretz. So there is a concern there as well. The concern is the same by Truma and by Kachim. But by Truma, there's an option of not accepting the Truma from the Amaretz. By Kachim, there's no option to not accept it. Because of this concept of Eva, we don't want to bring Eva on Amaretz, so therefore there's no option not to accept it. So by Kachim, the Chazal were geyser that even Chaverim should not toivel this way. So in order that Amaretz should not see this, so it should not become a problem in the first place. That's what it boils down to. In fact, the Gemara, this next whole sugi here, will be discussing the status and different things in connection to an Amaretz. Who is the source? Where do we find such a concept that we are afraid, we don't want to reject the Amaretz, that it will cause Eva, that it will be hatred? Rabbi Yasi. Why do we believe and accept from anybody, from even an Amaretz, when he wants to donate to the Beis HaMikdash, wine or oil all year round? What happens if all the Amaretzim, we're not going to accept from them these donations to the Beis HaMikdash? They'll go and build a Beis HaMikdash for themselves. Or v'sayif paraduma latzmai, they'll go and make a paraduma for themselves. So for Kachim and even for the paraduma, since they have no other place, we don't want them to have another place where to go, so we have no choice, we accept it even from an Amaretz. So therefore they made certain chumris regarding Kachim, so that Amaretzim shouldn't learn to make mistakes about this. Rav Papa, in connection to this, Rav Papa also said, according to whose opinion do we accept today Eidus from an Amaretz? Even though there's reasons not to trust an Amaretz, but today we accept Eidus from an Amaretz. According to Rabbi Yasi's opinion. Like that just said, that we don't want to reject an Amaretz because it could cause Eva. Okay, so that's a similar thing regarding Eidus. And there's a Taisus here that says a similar thing, B'negeya to making zimun by benching. There's a Gemara in Brachas that says that in the zimun, by benching, you shouldn't include an Amaretz. So Taisus says, today we don't do that. For two reasons, Taisus says. Number one, for the reason the Gemara says right here, Eva, it'll cause people to be very upset about this. And number two, Taisus says, who can go and say, I'm the Talmud Chacham, and you're the Amaretz, and therefore I'm not going to include you in the zimun. So therefore that doesn't apply today. Okay, but the Gemara is not done yet. The Gemara, what did we say before? When it comes to Truma, we don't accept from an Amaretz the Truma. When it comes to Kachim, we do accept from them the Kachim. So only by Kachim is it a problem. By Truma, it's not a problem. Fragt the Gemara, but v'neichesh l'shayla. Even by Truma, we should still be concerned about the fact that isn't it possible that a person will go and borrow a vessel to use from an Amaretz? So what you're saying we don't accept? No, we do. It's possible that a person borrows a keli from an Amaretz. And where do you see this concept that we borrow kelim from an Amaretz? The Gemara is going to bring here a Mishnah that it says this. The Mishnah there speaks about a different subject, but in the Mishnah you see this concept that we borrow from an Amaretz. Kli cheres matzel ala kail. A kli cheres. Now, what kind of kli cheres are we talking about? First, there's a few points here to understand what this Mishnah is speaking about. There's a halacha by a kli cheres that's called a tzamid pasel, which means if you have a kli cheres which is properly sealed, anything that's inside the kli cheres, even if it's in a house where there's a mace and there's tumah, but sealed inside the kli cheres is going to be tar. That's one halacha regarding a kli cheres. A similar halacha regarding a kli cheres is if you have a mace that's in the bottom floor of a house and you have the second floor, and there's a hole in between the two floors. So whatever tumah is on the bottom goes up through the hole to the top floor as well. What happens if the person on the top floor places a kli cheres into that hole to clog the hole? So then that prevents the tumah from going upstairs. But what this Mishnah is speaking about is a kli cheres of an amaretz. A kli cheres of an amaretz, so we consider it to be something which is a status of tumah, because we don't know how if amaretz was careful with it or not. So the halacha is a kli cheres that it itself is tameh cannot protect anything inside of it of being tahir. So the Mishnah says, kli cheres matzel ala koil. Nevertheless, this kli cheres, even though it's from an amaretz, it still will save everything else that's inside of it, that it'll be tahir. Divrei Beis Hillel, this is Beis Hillel's opinion. It's a kli cheres from an amaretz, and a kli cheres of an amaretz is itself tameh. So how could it save anything that it's inside from tumah? So it's not explained over here, but the point is that Beis Hillel's opinion is that a kli cheres of an amaretz, we don't know for sure that it's tameh. If you have a kli cheres that you know for a fact is tameh, whatever's inside of it will be tameh. It doesn't save anything. But a kli cheres from an amaretz, which is a person that is not so careful with tumah, he doesn't know halachas properly, Beis Hillel says we still consider this kli cheres to be in a status of tara for this purpose, that what's inside of it will be protected from tumah. Base. The what? What? We'll see. 1 second. We'll get back to that question in a second. 1 second. First, let's see the pshat over here in this Mishnah. Beis Shammai say, "Einay matzel ela al oichlem vala mashkim." You have a kli cheres that comes from an amaretz. So if you have food or drink that's inside of it, so then that it will save it. It will not become tameh. Val kli cheres, and also a kli cheres that's inside of this kli cheres will not become tameh. But, as we'll see soon, if it's regular kalim, if it's other kinds of kalim that's inside of it, that will be tameh. So now, Amru lehem Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel say to the Beis Shammai, mipnei ma. What's the reason for this? Why are you saying that the food and the drink and the kli cheres that's inside of it, it's going to be saved? It's going to be it's not going to be saved. It's going to be again. It is going to be saved again. It's only why again. His question is, why are you making this distinction? Why are you saying b'negei to the oichlin and the mashkin that it will be saved, and for everything else it will not be saved? So Amru Beis Shammai answered, or another girsa here is Amru Lahem. They said to them, Mipnei shu tamei al gabei amaretz. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a kli cheres that it itself is we consider it to be tamei because it belongs to an amaretz. And the rule is as follows: ve'ein kli tamei chaitzitz. If the outside kli cheres is itself tamei, it does not create a chatzitze. It does not save what's inside of it from any tumah. So now Amru lehem Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel says to them, but v'halei tihartem oichlin amashkim shebeteichai. The food and the drink that's inside, and the kli cheres as well, that you say is tar. So what's the distinction? Why, when it comes to anything else, if you have anything inside this kli cheres, Beis Shammai says it would be tameh. Only the food and the drink that's inside, that will be tar. What's the reason for this difference? Amru lehem Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai explains as follows. When we said for this amaretz, so he has this kli cheres, and then he has the food and the drink that's inside. So when we're mitayr the food and the drink that's inside, la'atzmai tiharno. So we're mitayr this for the amaretz himself, right? This is food. What is he going to do with this food? He's going to drink it and eat it for himself. No other person is going to take this food and drink from the amaretz. We're not afraid that he's going to share it with someone else. So if it's for himself, so therefore we say that for him it's tar. Avol netayres hakeli shetihartoi l'cha viloi. But should we say that if there are other kalim that are inside this kli cheres, if you're going to say that those other kalim are tar inside of it, so then that's going to be something which is tar for him and for other people as well. Why? Because the other kalim that's inside over there, not only the amaretz might use these kalim for himself, he might lend it out to someone else to use. So by being mitayr kalim, you're going to be mitayr for other people as well, and that we don't want to do. So the point over here that you see is that it's customary for people to borrow kalim from an amaretz, and there's no gzeira against that. If so, going back to the point that we said before, that when it comes to an Amma Aretz that's using the Kalim, so there's no concern that he might not toivel them properly. Why? Because we're not going to accept Truma from them. Yeah, but there's still excited that the Kalim, the way they toivel them, they don't toivel them properly, and we're going to borrow the Kalim from them. Even if we don't accept Truma from them, but we see that we do borrow Kalim from them. It says here clearly the Lashon of this Mishnah, Tihartei l'cha v'lai. Okay, now before the Gemara comes back to concluding this question and answering this question, the Gemara will bring a Baraisa that will explain more specifically the opinion of Beis Shammai. And this is a Mishnah in Idias, and over there it actually says that eventually Beis Hillel retracted their opinion and they agreed to Beis Shammai. So what does it say there? Tanya, we learned in a Baraisa. Rabbi Yeshua said, Beis Shani midivrechem Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, I'm embarrassed of what you said. I'm embarrassed of your opinion. And he said as follows, Efshir, is it possible? So he's talking about the case that Beis Shammai was speaking about. Again, one of the examples was when you have tumah that's in the bottom floor of the house, and you have the second floor in the house, and there was a hole between the two floors, and you placed the kli cheres inside this hole to separate from the tumah. So now you have a isha, you have a woman that's on the second floor of the house, Losha Ba'areva, she's kneading her dough in a bowl. So Isha V'Areva Tmein, the woman herself and the bowl that she's kneading in, they're going to be Tameh. Why? Because Beis Shammai says that the keli itself becomes Tameh. But Tmeim Shiva, they're going to be Tameh like the tumah of a mace, that it's a Tameh for 7 days. Ubatzek Tar, but the food, the dough itself, that will be Tar. That's the distinction that Beis Shammai made, right? That it will the food itself we consider to be Tar, but any other kelim, if it's not a Kli Cheres, that will be Tar. How could you make such a kind of distinction? And it says the same thing, Lugin, Male Mashkin, if on the second floor, so you're storing over there, you have Lugin, you have these jugs that are full with liquid inside of it. So Lugin, Tameh Tumah Shiva. So the Lugin, the jugs themselves, they're going to be Tameh. Umashkin Tahir. But the drink, the liquid that's inside of it, that's going to be Tahir. How could you make such a kind of distinction? So the question that he was asking is, either you say everything is Tameh because I consider these Keli of Amma Aret that was trying to protect from the Tumah not to be a protection, or it is a good protection. If it is a good protection, it should be a protection for everything. Why are you making this kind of distinction? So Rabbi Yeshua said a very strong lashon, B'shani midivrechem, I'm mamish embarrassed of your opinion. So what happened? Nitfa loy talmid echad mit talmid Beis Shammai. One of the talmidim of the talmid Beis Shammai came and had a conversation with Rabbi Yeshua about this. Amallah, he said to him, I'll explain to you the reason of Beis Shammai. Amallah, so Rabbi Yeshua said, Amar, say, let me hear, what's the explanation for the reason? So Amallah, he said to Rabbi Yeshua, Kli Tomei, Chaitzitz le'eina Chaitzitz. If I have a Kli Cheres that's sealed, but the Kli Cheres itself is Tomei, is that going to be Chaitzitz? Is that going to separate from the Tumah that's outside of it? Amalei, so he answered him, Eina Chaitzitz. No, it will not separate the Tumah that's outside of it. So then he asked him further, Kli Shel Amma Aretz. What's the halacha? What's the status of a keli that belongs to an Amma Aretz? Tomei or Tar? Do we treat it as something which is Tomei or Tar? Amalei Tomei. So he told him, a keli of an Amma Aretz is Tomei. So if so, he said to him, V'matay meloi Tomei. If you're going to go and tell this Amma Aretz that what you have is Tomei, Klum Mashgiach Alecha, is he going to listen to you? If you're going to come and tell an Amma Aretz, you know that your keli is Tomei, and that the food that's inside of this Kli Cheres is also Tomei. Is he even going to pay attention to you? He doesn't follow the halachis, he doesn't listen, so he's not even going to listen to you. V'loyoi, then not only this, if you're going to tell him that something is Tomei, what he's going to tell you is Shali Toir and V'shalcha Tomei. He's going to tell you, no, I know the halacha is better, I'm careful, what I have is Toir and what you have is Tomei. This is the explanation for the reason of Beis Shammai that made a distinction between food and drink and other kelim. So Rashi here explains that the point is, when it comes to eichlin umashkin, so since the Amma Aretz is going to be eating this for himself, so there's no point in saying that these eichlin umashkin are tameh. He's anyways not going to listen to us. So we just tell him that it's toyer. And the same thing Rashi says, b'negei kli cheres. A kli cheres, if you're going to tell him that it's tameh, what do you do with a kli cheres that's tameh? You can't toivel it in a mikveh. Kli cheres that's tameh, the only thing you can do with it is break it. So he's anyways not going to listen to us. So therefore for a kli cheres as well, we tell him that for you the kli cheres is toyer. When it comes to other kinds of kelim though, that he's able to be toivel, so over there, we don't tell him that it's tameh, We don't tell him that it's tar, that is, we tell him that it's tar. That's possible that he should go and be taivalit, and he could listen to us and taivalit, and therefore over there we make the distinction and we say that it's tar. That's the explanation of Beishamai's opinion. And so again, the point of here is not coming back to the original question that we asked. Well, actually, the Gemara first finishes the story of what happened. After Rabbi Yeshua heard this reason of Beishamai, so miyad, halach Rabbi Yeshua v'nishtatech hakivri Beishamai. Rabbi Yeshua went to the kvarim of the Talmidim of Beishamai, and Omar, he said, Nenesi lechem atzmeis Beishamai. I spoke too strongly against your opinion, Beishamai. And then he said, Umas stumis shalachem. If the halachas that you say that are stumis, that are hard to understand, kach, and nevertheless has a good reason, like it was just explained to me, mufurashais halachas kama v'kama. Most definitely those halachas that you say that are clear and are explained, most definitely have a good reason to them. And Amru, they said about Rabbi Yeshua, Kol Yomav, his entire lifetime, Huchsharu Shinov Mipnei Tani Yosef. His teeth became black because of the fasting that he fasted when he spoke so strongly against the Talmidim of Beishamai when he said that he's embarrassed of their opinion. Katani miyis. Now the Gemara concludes our question. What did we say over here? L'cha v'loi. That when it comes to kalim that are inside this kli cheres, so over here, what did Beishamai say? We're going to consider it to be tamei. Why? Because this is something that the people will borrow from them, and therefore we say that it's tamei in order for them to know that they have to taivel it before anyone borrows it for them. So if so, there should be a concern that we borrow kalim from an Amma Aretz. So how did we say before regarding Trumah that there's no gzeira, that we're concerned that it's not going to be taivel properly because we don't take Trumah from them, but we still borrow kalim from them? Alme shalinan minayu. We see that we do borrow from them kalim. Answers the Gemara, ki shalinan minayu. When we borrow this kalim from them, matbilinan lahu. We're going to taivel these kalim. So yeah, we do taivel it from them, but as soon as we taivel it from them, we can't just use it as is. We have to right away taivel it ourselves. So therefore, we're not going to just borrow. So our question was, we're concerned that we're borrowing from them. Yeah, we borrow from them, but we have to taivel it over ourselves. So therefore, we're not going to make any gzeiris that the tefillah that they did maybe was not good, because we're anyways going to taivel it over again. Fragt the Gemara, if so, that is, if so, let Beis Hillel answer Beis Shammai and tell them, that when we borrow it from them, we're going to taivel it over again. Why are you saying that Beis Shammai explained regarding the food and the drink that they eat for themselves, so that we say to them that it's tar, because they're anyways eating it for themselves? Regarding the kalim, because it's going to be tar for themselves, and they're lending it out to other people as well, so that we have to make sure to tell them that this is tamei. So Beis Hillel should answer to them, why do you have to tell the Amaratzim that it's tamei? Anyways, any person that's going to borrow it from them is going to taivel it over again. So even if the Amaratzim for themselves are going to consider it to be tar for themselves, but whoever's going to borrow it for them is going to taivel it over anyways. Answers the Gemara, but that's not always an option. Tmei meis, boy azah, gimel v'zayin. Something that's a tmei meis, you can't just taivel it. If something gets tummy from a sheretz, you could just taivel it in the mikveh. But if something is a tmei meis, you first have to do hazah from a para adumah the third day and the seventh day. So therefore, a keli, 7 days, people don't borrow a keli necessary for such a long period of time. And therefore, so it's not going to be an option to say that when you're going to borrow it, you're going to just taivel it over again. Yeah, so therefore, we have to let them know that these kelim are tamei, so that the Amaratzim themselves should know that they have to sprinkle the waters of the Para Adum on it. So the Gemara, what comes out? Huh?
Are you going to believe them then?
For the Hazah of the Para Adum, it looks like we will. But you still will have to taivel it over again, though. That's the interesting thing over here, yeah. So the Gemara, Vatvile loy mehemni, v'nigeyet tetvila. It comes out from what we just said over here. The Gemara said that when we borrow the kelim from them, so you taivel it over, you have to taivel it again. We're not relying on their tefillah. Frek the Gemara, is that true? We do not rely on the tefillah of an Amma Aretz. But Vatanya, we learned in a Braisa, Nemanen Mami Aretz, Altaras, Tfilas, Tmei Meis. The Ami Aretz are believed to be mitayr themselves, to be taivel from a Tmei Meis. So they're believed for this. Amar Abaye loikashi, it's not a question. Hobegufay, if their body themselves becomes tamei, for that they're believed. That's something that's much more severe. And hobekelov, when it comes to their kalim, for that we don't trust them that they're doing the tefillah of the kalim properly. Rava Amar, Rava says, idi v'idi bekelov. in both the Braisa here and what we said before is both talking about the Kalim of an Amaretz, and sometimes we do trust them, and sometimes not. For Loi Kashi, it's not a question. If an Amaret comes and tells you, I never toiveled one keli inside of another, I did the tefillah properly with no chatzitza, we believe him. And then there's another case where he comes and says that I did toivel the keli, but I did not toivel it inside a keli which has in it kishveferes hanoid, the very she'ein befiv kishveferes hanoid, that it does not have this little opening in it, and therefore I did the tefillah properly. For that we don't believe him. In other words, the point over here is that we don't believe in Amaretz to say that he knows certain halachas, because we don't trust them that they know the halachas properly. That we don't believe them. But if an Amaretz comes and says that he toiveled the kelim, and he toiveled it without a chatzitza, that we do believe them that they do know, and for the basic tefillah, we accept what they said. We're not chayshish that he's lying. The Gemara brings a raya to this, v'hatanya, like we learned in the Braisa, a similar thing that it says regarding an Amaretz, Nemon Amaretz loymar, peiros lehuchshru. An Amaretz is believed to say that these produce never came in touch with liquid, and therefore it's not susceptible to any tumah. That we believe them. That they know, and we accept what they say, and they're not lying. What we don't believe them to say is peiros huchshru, that these peiros became wet and they became susceptible to tumah. But it still did not become tumah. To that extent, we don't believe them that they know the halachas to be careful. Frag the Gemara, va'gufay mi mehemen. How about before we said regarding their own body, if they become tamei, we do trust them that they're going to toivel properly. Regarding that, do we believe them? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, it says chaver shabala hazais, a chaver, person that knows the halachas, that comes to do azah on a person, mazanal of miyad. So we do this chaver. Again, a chaver himself that's tamei, and we want to do azah on him, we can do the azah of the paraduma immediately, no preconditions. Amaretz shabala hazais, and Amaretz that wants us to do azah on him, we have to determine, we have to know for a fact that this is the third day of his tumah or the seventh day of his tumah. We don't rely on him counting this. So what do we see over here? When it comes to the tumah of the gufan of an Amaretz, we don't trust him to come and tell us, I already counted 3 days. We have to see it for our own eyes. That's even when you get to the tumah of his guf. So the Gemara says, so Abaye answers, because we were very stringent with him in the beginning, that he has to count in front of us the 3 days and then the 7 days. So therefore, in the end, we were more makel that when he goes to the mikveh, we rely that he actually went to the mikveh. Because he knows he sees that the Chachamim are giving him such trouble in the beginning, so therefore he wants to already finish with this, so he's going to be careful to go to the mikveh properly at the end. Said in the Mishnah, achirayim v'toich, that there are different parts of the keli. There's the outside part of the keli, the inside part of the keli. Zok the Gemara, ma'ay achirayim v'toich. What does this mean? Kedetnan, we learned in the Mishnah, kol shenitma achirav, kli that is, kli shenitma achirav v'mashkin, a keli that the outside of the keli became tummy with liquids. Now this is only a tummy with the Rabbanan. Usually food does not make a keli tummy, but with mashkin, there's excited that it could be a mashka of a zov. So therefore, Chachamim will geyser that it's tamei. A chayr of tmeim, the outside of the keli will be tamei. But teichai, oignai, aznav, v'yadav, tahir. The inside and different kinds of handles of the keli, that will all stay tahir. Nitma teichai, the inside became tamei, then kulei tamei. Then the entire keli becomes tamei. The next thing it said in the Mishnah is ubeis hatzbita. What is this lashon beis hatzbita? A certain part of the keli. My beis hatzbita. What is this? Rav Yudah Mashmuel Mokim Shet Tzayftei. This is the handle basically. Tzayftei means that you hold on to it in order to be able to serve and offer to other people. V'cheinu oime vayitzbait la koli. And he offered and he gave her koli. So vayitzbait means where you hold it and you could serve it. Abasiyam Rav Yechanan said a different pshat. Mokem shenikiya das tzayvin. Inside a keli, they had this little groove inside a plate where they would put like a dip. Rashi says they would put vinegar or mustard inside there, and that's where they would dip inside the keli. So that's like a little groove, a little section inside the keli. Tanarav Bevek Hamed Rav Nachman Kol HaKelim Ein Lehem Achirayim V'Toich. All kelim, we do not make a distinction between the outside of the keli and the inside of the keli. Echad Kotshei HaMikdash, whether this is regarding Kotshei HaMikdash, and vecha kotche agvul, or the kotchim that is not only in the Beis Hamikdash but outside in Yerushalayim. So for all these kinds of kotchim, we don't distinguish and say that if one part of the keli became tamei, the other part of the keli is not tamei. It all becomes tamei. This is the chumrah by kotchim. So the Gemara explains, Amalei kotche hagvul ma'ininu. What is this kotche hagvul? What's the kotchim that's in Yerushalayim? Trume, isn't that to trume? Trume, you can eat even in Yerushalayim, and actually gvul means l'chayda not only in Yerushalayim. You could eat it anywhere in Eretz Yisrael. Fragt the Gemara, but what Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, achirayim v'toichu beis hatzbita l'trume. That when it comes to truma, we do distinguish between the inside of the keli, the outside of the keli, and the handle of the keli. So how could you say that when it comes to kotche agvul, which refers seemingly to truma, that we don't make a distinction, that it's all one thing and it all becomes tameh? So the Gemara answers, no, maybe the pshat of what he said is different. Dilmil l'chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh ka'amrit. Maybe what he meant to say is that he was referring to chulin, that a person is eating on the same level of tara like kotchim. And what he's saying is, whether it's kotchim itself, whether it's chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh, it's all going to be the same halacha that once part of the keli becomes tamei, the whole keli is tamei. So after he gave him this answer, he said, at kartan milse, dam Rabbi Baravua. You just reminded me something that we said in the name of Rabbi Baravua. He said, achas estre mailas shanukan. The Mishnah mentions here 11 different chumres that there is by kotchim. And he said, Sheish Rishainis, the first 6 chumras in our Mishnah is Bein L'Kaidish and Bein L'Chulin Shanas Al Taras HaKaidish. It applies both for kotchim itself and also for chulin that you treat with the same level as kotchim. Achrainis, the last 5 in the Mishnah, is only L'Kaidish Avalei L'Chulin Shanas Al Taras HaKaidish, not for the Chulin Shanas Al Taras HaKaidish. So therefore, what he was saying is, whether it's kotchim, whether it's chulin Shanas Al Taras HaKaidish, either way, the same chumrah applies, that we don't distinguish between one section of the keli and the other. It'll all be tamei if a part of it became tamei.